Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Nick Harper. Nick, good evening from New Delhi.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, increased pressure on US President Joe Biden to drop out of the race as more Democrats tell him it's time to go. And the United Nations urges Russia to end its occupation of Europe's largest nuclear power plant. But first, the headlines.
India's Niti Aayog says the country has performed well in poverty alleviation and hunger indicators despite global headwinds. The overall Sustainable Development Goals SDG score of India rises to 71 in 2023-24 from 57 in 2018. Global press ridicules Joe Biden's verbal slips at the end of a NATO summit. Biden remains undeterred despite 17 congressional Democrats expressing disappointment.
Over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway.
And Nepal's Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachand ousted after losing the trust vote today.
Joe Biden does not give up. The eagerly awaited final press conference of the NATO summit was considered the last appeal test given to the president, also to prove that he could still lead the campaign and then dispel doubts about his mental agility due to his advanced age. Is it well that on this occasion too, the president stumbled into some clamorous slip-ups?
With this press conference at the end of the NATO summit, US President Biden has further fueled the debate about whether he is fit for a second term in office. Many questions refer to his fitness. When he spoke about his deputy Harris, he referred to her as Vice President Trump.
Successful exercise or catastrophe averted. Joe Biden's performance in this press conference at the end of the NATO summit is somewhere in between. This conference given to the American press could not make us forget that the catastrophe during the debate on CNN.
Well, this is how world media is reacting to unrelenting Joe Biden joining a chorus of at least a dozen lawmakers in his party itself. Biden's verbal slips at the end of a NATO summit could not make people forget his lackluster showing in the debate against Republican candidate Donald Trump on CNN. You listened to some of the clippings from television media. We now show you some of the tabloid headlines. Joe No screamed the front page of the Sun website in the United Kingdom, branding as toe-curling Biden's calling Kamala Harris Vice President Trump and introducing Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky as President Putin. In the Netherlands, the Telegraph branded the mix-up as a blunder, while Italy's La Repubblica referred to, quote, a flurry of gaffes. In London, the Financial Times headlined the fact that Biden had vowed to press on with his bid for re-election despite these verbal slip-ups. So with everything on the line, his presidency, his re-election hopes, his political life, it now seems no amount of embarrassment will budge Joe Biden from running for November elections. Let's now take this question, whether President Biden is fit to be re-elected for the White House, to our team in Washington. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, would Biden's performance at the press conference yesterday be enough to silence his doubters?
Well, it's certainly being picked over here in the US media. The Biden allies, though, are saying they're confident he's done enough to win over those doubters. But US President Joe Biden still remains heavily under the cosh after 3 more members of Congress from his own Democratic Party joined a growing list of lawmakers demanding that he drop out of the race for the White House. Those calls for the 81-year-old to step aside have escalated since the president stumbled through a recent TV debate with former President Donald Trump 2 weeks ago. In an effort to allay fears about his fitness for office, Joe Biden held that hour-long press conference last night at the NATO summit. Our reporter Benji Haya was there.
This was a solid, yet albeit unspectacular performance from the president, though it's unlikely to move the needle either way. He didn't do enough to quell those rising concerns about his candidacy, nor enough to end it altogether. His bid for re-election is still in peril, following further defections from his own party. Biden was defiant, insisting he's best qualified to govern and win. He was particularly cogent and fluent in response to questions about foreign policy. But in this era of heightened scrutiny, the event will be remembered more for a series of slip-ups. He mistakenly referred to his deputy, Kamala Harris, as Vice President Trump, just hours after he accidentally introduced his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky as President Putin. Remarks met with a sharp intake of breath from world leaders and journalists alike. His rival and predecessor Donald Trump was quick to mock those gaffes on social media, in response to which Joe Biden told reporters to listen to Trump, implying the Republican Party frontrunner is also prone to verbal stumbling, not to mention what his critics perceive as the threat he poses to democracy and America's standing in the world. It'll be Trump's turn to be the centre of attention again at the Republican National Convention next week, where he'll be officially announced as the nominee for November's election. But then the spotlight will likely return back to the current president, who says he's sticking around to finish the job. Benji Haya in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Well, the 3-day NATO summit in Washington, D.C. concluded on July the 11th with the launch of a Ukraine compact, a security framework signed by 32 allies. The newly announced Ukraine compact builds upon the joint G7 declaration made at last year's NATO summit in Vilnius. The compact states that members will support Ukraine together and in a unified, coordinated and comprehensive architecture and, more importantly, not just for now, but for years to come in the future. Let's run through what the countries are planning to do to help Ukraine. In the short term, the 32 allies of Ukraine will continue to supply the weapons, munitions and training they need to repel Russian forces. In the medium term, they'll help to build a future force that has the strength and capabilities both to defend Ukraine and deter further aggression. And then in the long term, after this conflict is over, if President Putin tries to launch another attack again on Ukraine, all the countries that endorse the compact have pledged to support the country of Ukraine. While addressing the leaders at the NATO summit, Biden reiterated that the Ukraine compact takes the relations with Ukraine to a new level, saying it was a significant achievement for Ukraine and all of the NATO alliance, for which Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed gratitude.
This compact brings all those countries together in a unified, coordinated, and comprehensive architecture to support Ukraine, not just for now, but for years in the future.
Ukraine compact we are forming takes our relations to a new level, a significant achievement for Ukraine and all of us.
President Biden further said he has no reason to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin right now unless Putin changes his behavior. Biden vowed that the United States cannot retreat from the world and said under his leadership, Washington will not walk away from its support for Ukraine.
I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior.
While watching the NATO summit from Moscow, the Kremlin said on Friday that US President Joe Biden's slips of the tongue at the NATO summit were for US voters and not for Russia to comment on. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Biden's mistake are the topic for the US voters to judge, and to judge whether or not Biden is fit for office. However, he further said that the Kremlin has taken note of what he called disrespectful comments Biden has made about Russia's President Putin during the NATO summit. All of this as the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday demanded that Russia urgently withdraws its military and other unauthorized personnel from Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The 193-member General Assembly adopted a resolution with 99 votes in favour, 9 against and 60 abstentions. The Zaporizhzhia plant, the largest in Europe, was captured by Russia shortly after it launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February 2022. And in a fresh development, Finland's parliament passed a law on Friday granting border guards the power to block asylum seekers crossing over from Russia. Over 1,300 people have arrived in the country, forcing Helsinki to close its land border. That happened late last year. Helsinki believes that Moscow is promoting the crossings in retaliation for Finland joining NATO. Finland has accused neighbouring Russia of weaponising migration by encouraging scores of migrants from countries such as Syria and Somalia to cross the border. That's an assertion, though, that the Kremlin denies. Meanwhile, there have been no new arrivals by asylum seekers since March. Moving on now to the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict, and Israel has announced it's sending a delegation to Cairo for more talks with mediators on a proposed ceasefire and hostage release deal. The announcement by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is the closest the two parties have come to bringing their differences together after months of intense negotiations facilitated by US, Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Egypt's involvement in the truce efforts is being driven by several strategic interests. In particular, as Egypt shares its border with Gaza, one of the primary concerns is the potential mass exodus of Palestinian refugees into Egypt. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have retreated from some Gaza City districts overnight after a fierce, week-long military offensive. It's home to more than a quarter of Gaza's residents before the conflict. Gaza City has now been largely destroyed as a result of that ongoing conflict. But hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have returned to homes amid the ruins. Israel has once again ordered evacuations, but residents are unclear where to go. Israel controls most of Gaza's borders and is also attacking central and southern Gaza. The offensive has now lasted for 10 months of Israel's campaign to eliminate Hamas terrorists. The Israeli government security cabinet has approved a plan to extend compulsory military service for men to 36 months from the current 32 months. The 36-month rule will stay in force for the next 8 years. The decision was taken at the security cabinet meeting that took place late on Thursday. The measure is likely to be submitted to a vote in a meeting of the full cabinet on Sunday. Israel's military commanders have said they need to boost manpower so they can sustain the offensive. Well, that's all from me here in Washington, D.C. Tanvi, back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Nick. Nick Harper joining us from Washington, D.C. You're with us on DD India Global, still to come on the show. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi stresses on the role of BIMSTEC as an engine for economic and social growth as foreign ministers call on him in New Delhi. And in the world of AI and tech dominating advanced era, we show you a unique context from Indonesia which tests the qualification of robots. Stay with us to know more.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
As India keeps getting hotter and hotter, people will be looking for innovations to help combat the impacts of climate change and to cut the emissions that are causing it.
Zero tillage wheat.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Now, Nepal's Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda lost a vote of confidence in Parliament today after CPN-UML, the largest coalition there, withdrew its support from the government last week. This ends his tumultuous 20-month tenure that saw him survive 4 such trust votes and paved the way for the formation of a new coalition government. He needed at least 138 votes in his favour in the 275-member House to retain power. A total of 63 of the 258 lawmakers present in the chambers voted for Dahal on Friday, while 194 voted against him and 1 abstained. On to India now. The country has accelerated progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals despite global headwinds. Releasing this data for the year 2023-24, the Government of India's premier policy think tank Niti Aayog expressed satisfaction at the overall SDG score of 71. At a press briefing in New Delhi, the Chief Executive Officer of Niti Aayog claimed that the country is well on track in achieving the target set by the United Nations by 2030. The CEO said significant progress has been made in eliminating poverty, providing decent work, economic growth, climate change and life on land.
25 crore people have moved out of multidimensional poverty. 52 crore bank accounts have been opened under Jan Dhan. 4 crore people have got houses under PM Awas. Atal Pension now covers 6 crore people. NRLM, which is where you get Lakpati Didis and all, there are 10 crore women who are enrolled there. And Manrega covers 14 crore people. 80 crore Indian citizens are getting subsidized food grains. And 10 crore Anganwadi children are being fed every day. I can state without any doubt that we are not only on track to meet the SDG goals, you can quote me, India is ahead in terms of meeting the SDG goals, and many of them we will meet the goals ahead of time.
And as India is hosting the BIMSTEC Foreign Ministers Retreat, these foreign ministers from the grouping paid a joint call on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Friday. Prime Minister Modi had fruitful discussions with the group of ministers on further strengthening regional cooperation in diverse areas, including connectivity, energy, trade, health, agriculture, science, security and people-to-people exchanges. He stressed on the role of BIMSTEC as an engine for economic and social growth. Prime Minister Modi reaffirmed India's commitment to a peaceful, prosperous, resilient and safe BIMSTEC region and highlighted its significance to India's neighbourhood first and look east policies, as well as its Sagar vision for security and growth for all in the region. The Indian Prime Minister expressed the country's full support to Thailand for the upcoming BIMSTEC summit that will be held in September this year. Further, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar today held talks with Thailand's Foreign Minister Maris Sangiampongsa. As a maritime neighbour, both countries have civilizational bonds and shared interests. The leaders thus held good discussions on intensifying engagement, covering political, defence, security, trade, investment, physical and financial connectivity, tourism and people-to-people ties. They also exchanged views on regional matters, India-ASEAN cooperation and Indo-Pacific cooperation, as well as cooperation in the United Nations. In an exclusive conversation with DD India's Narayan Singh, Sweden's ambassador to India, Jan Thesleff, emphasized the pivotal role of the Gothia Cup in promoting inclusivity. Gothia Cup is the world's largest international youth football tournament.
Gothia Cup is one of the premier football tournament in the world, and to talk more on this, I am joined by the Ambassador of Sweden in India. Sir, a very warm welcome as our Indian team is going to participate in this Gothia Cup. So it is one of the, as you know, that's the biggest youth football tournament in the world. How such initiative is going to help the cause of inclusivity and help the athletes with intellectual disabilities?
Gothia Cup is, as you said, the biggest youth tournament in the world. It gathers 1,700 teams from 80 countries, and we are very, very proud to have India in Gothia Cup. And for the first time this year, we have also Special Olympics Bharat with us, with a team.
The Indo-Sweden relations are very deep and very close. So do you think through the sports, as Sweden has the players like, has a great legacy in the football like Ibrahimovic, and India is doing great in the cricket, and recently they won the T20 World Cup. Through sports, we can take this bonding at the next level?
You know, politics are important, business is important, culture is important, but the most important thing actually is people to people. And what really brings people together is sports.
We are strong together. This is the message by the Sweden's ambassador to India, and we are hoping that, as he mentioned, that through sports we can take this momentum at the next level. With camera person Gaurav Giri, Narayan Singh for DD India, New Delhi.
And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Landslides swept 2 buses into the swollen Trishuli River in Nepal on Friday. The 2 buses were carrying 65 passengers who are now feared missing in the river. This comes after landslides hit Simaltal area along the Narayan Ghat Muggling Road in Chitwan district. According to officials, the missing people also include 7 Indians. Search and rescue operation is underway. AT&T multinational telecommunications company reported a massive hacking incident on Friday. Data from about 109 million customer accounts containing records of calls and texts from 2022 was illegally downloaded in April. The FBI investigation into the issue is underway. At least 1 person has been arrested as of now. In the UK, at least 65 long-finned pilot whales have died after being stranded on an island off the northern coast of Scotland. Whales can get stranded on shore for a range of reasons, such as when they lose their way or get trapped by tides. But scientists say there is no single definitive reason behind this phenomena, which has been recorded throughout history. Now, as the world is making its way to artificial intelligence and tech-dominating advanced era, Indonesia organized a unique contest, this one to test the qualification of robots. Well, this contest is called KRI, an annual robotic contest for college students. A total of 142 teams from 57 campuses in the country participated in the Indonesian Robot Contest KRI 2024. The contest is part of the effort to advance education and robotics technology in the country. So that's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles: Facebook, Twitter, formerly Twitter, that is X, and Instagram at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.